One common question I get is how much money have you made on Turo and how much of it is profit? So in this video, I'm gonna go through and show you my earnings and profits so you can see what may be possible. More importantly, I'm gonna go into details explaining why that really doesn't mean much. And it's because everyone's revenue and profit will depend on such a huge number of factors. So let's get into it. In August of 2022, after pondering over it for months or even longer, I finally decided to take the risk and buy another car just to list it on Turo. As you can imagine, that was pretty scary because that's a whole nother car payment that I'd now be responsible for. But then I thought, if I never take risks, then I'll never make progress. And so I did it. I'll make a separate video detailing how I decided on the car I got and where I got it. I think I made it available around September of 2022, and a few weeks later, it got booked for its first trip in early October of 2022. I was obviously super excited. Then from October to December, it ended up getting booked on a total of 7 trips for a total revenue of $4,725. Now, since I work from home, I decided to also list my car, which I had done a few years back. It got booked on a total of 5 trips and earned a total revenue of $1,859 for a total revenue in 2022 from October to December of $6,584. Then in 2023, my car needed new tires, and so I just unlisted it. And so the following 2023 numbers are just for the car I bought to specifically list on Turo. As of today, June 27th, 2023, it's been on 9 trips and it's earned a total revenue of $8,892. It has another $3,723 in upcoming earnings for trips booked through August. For a total year-to-date revenue, January through August, $12,615 for 11 total trips. Now, keep in mind what you guys keep asking, this is revenue, not profit. So again, my numbers will likely not match any of yours. And that's not just for profit, even for revenue. And this is because everything will depend on a large number of factors. So here's a number of factors that your revenue will depend on. It's going to depend on demand. And that's demand in your market, how much rental demand is in your specific market, how much rental demand for Turo is in your specific market, demand for your make, model, year car, then demand for your specific car, which in turn is going to depend on another set of factors such as your profile, your host status. Are you an all-star host? Your ratings, do you have good ratings? Do you have good reviews? It's also going to depend on your settings. Things like, do you offer delivery? What hours are you available? Also, obviously going to depend on your price. Are you competitive? Do you offer lower prices? Do you offer certain discounts over others? The next factor is price, which will depend on a number of things like your market. What is the going rate for your market? The next thing is, what's the rate for your specific vehicle? And then also, what do you set it at? So obviously, all these items will affect the price, which in turn affects the revenue you will earn. Then there's other things such as how many vehicles do you have? Obviously, the more vehicles, the more you can earn. Then you have the Turo insurance plan. So Turo has a number of different insurance plans that you can choose from. The higher the insurance premium that you're paying, the less revenue you will be making. And then finally, it's gonna also depend on revenue earned from incidentals or extras. So things like earning revenue from a car seat that you've rented out, or making money when the car's not returned with a full tank of gas and you're able to charge that gas plus a convenience fee. Or if you have mileage fees that you're earning for people going over mileage. And even from claims, there's been hosts that are able to make a certain amount of profit on some of their damage claims. So now that we've talked about all of the factors that will affect your revenue, we can now talk about the factors that will affect your profit. And these are your specific expenses. Again, very variable from one person to the next. So the first one we'll talk about is the recurring expenses, which means expenses you know ahead of time and you pay on a certain frequency, say monthly. So for example, things like the car payment, which would be 0 if in your case you were able to purchase a car cash. Your insurance payment, the registration. Then we have trip-related expenses, such as car washing, picking up and delivering the car, and handling or management costs. If you're paying someone to pick up the car, drop it off, get it washed, etc. Now, just like before, these trip-related expenses will depend on a number of things as well. The major one being whether you're doing all of these things yourself or you're paying someone else to do them. So for example, are you washing and delivering the cars yourself, or are you paying someone else to do that? Also, are you taking Ubers back and forth from picking up or delivering the car? Or is a spouse or a friend dropping you off and picking you up? The other thing that will affect these trip-related expenses is the trip lengths. Obviously, the longer the trip, the better. So say for each trip, you pay $20 in car washes and $30 for deliveries, for a total $50 in trip-related expenses per trip. Then here's two scenarios with different trip lengths, and you can see how much of a difference it will make to your revenue. Again, and this is really important if you're paying someone else or paying others to handle this. If you're handling it yourself, then it's still going to affect in the sense that it's your time that's being taken up, but it won't really affect your profit. But say during a 30-day period, if your car is rented on 3 10-day long trips, then your total expense for that trip would have been 3 trips times the $50 that we're spending on each trip for a total expenses of $150. Whereas if instead of it being on 3 10-day long trips, it's on 6 5-day long trips, so each trip is half the length, your total expenses would be 6 trips times $50 each trip. So that's $300. That's double the first scenario. So this is an example where your car was rented for the same amount of time, 30 days, except in one, you only paid $150 in expenses, and in the other, you paid $300 in expenses because you had to turn around the car a few more times. And of course, there's other minor factors to take into account, such as the fact that you may have discounts for longer trips, but that's just stuff you're gonna have to sort of play with. You don't necessarily have to have discounts, so that's just something for you to look into. But for the most part, you'll end up better off with the longer trips. In my case, I have a minimum trip length of 7 days. And then I was lucky enough to get 3 really long trips. One was a 56-day and 2 were 30-day trips, which means I saved a lot of money on car washes and pickups and deliveries. Although I may need to revisit my settings to make sure that my discounts for longer trips are set properly. The last type of expenses is the non-recurring expenses. And these are ones that you cannot plan ahead for. I mean, you may be able to plan some, but for the most part, they're ones you don't pay on a recurring basis. So things like car maintenance and repairs, so oil changes, new tires, any repairs needed, etc. And also supplies, so things like windshield wiper fluid, air fresheners, or cleaning supplies. So now you can see why it's really impossible for someone to tell you how much money you can make on Turo or any other similar platform, because it's going to depend on all of the things we just went over. However, by watching these type of videos, at least you can get an idea for what's possible, and also guidance on what types of things to look for, what types of things to research and calculate, so that you can kind of get a ballpark figure of what you can potentially make. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you plan on watching more of these. It really does help. So now we're gonna look at my numbers specifically. For simplicity, we're just gonna look at 2023, which was again only 1 car. Okay, so for 2023 year to date through August, my total revenue was $12,615. And here were my expenses. So for the recurring expenses, my car payment was $670 and the insurance was $80 for a total monthly expense of $750. Now you multiply that by the 8 total months, January through August, and the total is $6,000. Now for my trip related expenses. So first I want to mention that for the 11 trips, I handled 4 of them myself and I paid someone else to handle the other 7. Also, something else to consider is that the person that was helping me is a very close relative, and so I probably paid a little bit more than what maybe you would be paying if you hired an employee. And I was okay with that. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case you think some of my numbers are high or maybe not, but I just wanted to mention that I was okay with paying about $20 an hour on average. So just keep that in mind. So the cost per trip for car wash was $50. For Ubers, it was $60. And for the handling of it all, it was $35. For a total cost per trip of $145. So if you multiply that by the 7 trips that they handled for me, I paid a total of $1,015. Now for the non-recurring expenses, I had $150 in supplies and about $200 in oil changes. Then I also paid to have the car taken to get the maintenance, and I calculated the hours that took and multiply that by the designated hourly rate for a total of about $100. So that's a total of $450 for the non-recurring expenses. So if we add up all of the expenses, the recurring, the trip related, and the non-recurring, that's a total of $7,465. So the total revenue was $12,615 minus the expenses of $7,465 for a total profit of $5,150. So if you divide this profit by the 8 months, that's $644 per month. That's not bad for mostly passive income. So let's look at a little bit of a breakdown. In my case, I handled 4 trips, and I've calculated that each trip takes approximately like 3 hours between the picking up and washing, putting gas, delivering, etc. So since I handled 4 trips times 3 hours, that's 12 hours spent doing that. Then since I have most messages being sent to guests automatically, I don't have much communicating to do with guests. And so I've calculated that I've probably spent a total of about 1 hour doing so in the past 8 months. Then I estimate that I've probably spent about 2 hours managing everything. So communicating with my relative, making sure everything's running smoothly, things like that. So in total, I've estimated that I've spent about 15 hours in 8 months. So if you divide the profit, 5,150, by the number of hours that I worked, 15, then you'd end up with a rate of about $343 an hour. That's pretty darn good. And remember, if I had done all of the work myself, then I would have saved that additional $1,115. But then I would have worked an additional 21 hours, which I calculated as the 7 trips times the 3 hours per trip, plus the 4 hours, which I calculated to handle the maintenance, which means that I would have worked a total of 40 hours in these 8 months. So the 15 that I worked plus the 25 that I would have worked if I had done everything myself. So if we calculate the rate again, that's 5,150 plus now the 1,115. So it's $62.65 in revenue divided by 40. And that gives us a rate of $157 an hour, which is still a very awesome rate. So all in all, it means that I would have profited $6,265 in 8 months. And that's about $783 per month for, on average, 5 hours of work per month. Now, if we look at a scenario where you're able to maybe add 2 more cars, again, now we know that everything is a variable. And so, of course, we would not be able to exactly multiply this number, but we can sort of estimate. So let's just assume that you're able to make this exact same amount, just replicated. If you were to add 2 more cars, you would be profiting $23.49 per month for about like 15 hours of work, or $587 per week for about 3.75 hours per week. So again, I know some of you think this is not passive income, and while it's not 100% passive, it's still pretty passive and with pretty nice returns and not so much risk. And again, this is different for everyone. For some, this may mean that now their car doesn't get repoed because now they can afford to just make the car payment. For others, this may be some really nice extra income coming in. And so I'll give you an example. In my case, I have an apartment that I bought a long time ago, and right now the $783 per month is more profit than what I'm profiting from that apartment. And so while real estate is a great thing to get into, it's also a lot harder. For example, I could potentially look into adding 1, 2, even maybe 3, depending on the cost, more cars to my Turo fleet, whereas I cannot go in and purchase another 2 or 3 apartments because it's just way more expensive. Not only will I probably not qualify for another 2 or 3 more apartments, but I won't have the down payment that is required, especially when you're adding on rental properties as opposed to your homestead or your first home. So you're being able to make a certain amount of profit with a lot less risk and obviously investment. So hopefully this gave you a much better idea as to what's possible, but also explained all of the items and things you're gonna have to really focus on and research to find what that ballpark figure is gonna be in your case. As always, if you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments. Please remember to like and subscribe. It really does help. I know everybody asks, and I know it sounds so cliche, and you're probably tired of hearing it, but it really does help. Thanks and good luck.